Hello, I'm here with Fernanda Perez, cross-border journalist, and I'm John Bonfiglio, Talk Radio Latin America correspondent. We're 2 days after that photograph was launched on the world media of the father and daughter who drowned in attempting to cross the border between Mexico and the US, and it's the morning after the first set of Democratic presidential debates in the US as well. So we're just going to have a conversation about the current situation of US-Mexico relations, the cross-border situation, what some of the potential Democratic candidates are proposing in terms of that particular space, and whether that's going to make any change, any viable change present for migrants and for residents of the border area. Fernanda, you live in El Paso, Texas.
Correct.
Can you maybe just give us a bit of a sense of how the migrant situation and the cross-border situation plays out on a day-to-day basis there, please?
Yeah, so it's very different than how the media had portrayed it for a very, very long time. It wasn't until it really went center stage that we kind of got a little more accuracy in the media. We actually got a lot of photographs of how migrants were living along the border. For example, in El Paso, we actually had a huge influx of migrants for a couple of, actually it's still continuing now, but some weekends were really, really, really exaggerated to the point where they had to put migrants under a bridge. No water, they fenced them in. There were pictures about that circulating in the internet as well.
And those migrants were crossing at unofficial border crossings, I guess you may say.
Yes, they were unauthorized border crossings, but as they were all seeking asylum, they have to be processed, and therefore they're put in these, whatever you want to call them, that has
camps.
Also been up for debate. Yes, these camps. Until they actually get their name called or they're called forward by a judge to present their case. And very, very few of them, I think it's around, I actually don't know the exact percentage. I know from Mexico, only 2% of the cases actually get granted asylum, but most of them will try to cross again.
And when these, what are predominantly family groups, cross the border, unofficial border crossings, do they then find Border Patrol and give themselves into Border Patrol in order to expedite that asylum process, right? They don't continue on secretly to Chicago or New York. They deliberately hand themselves in once they're on US soil.
Yes, correct. The vast majority of the time they will do that because they know that they have to wait in the US until their case is taken up by a judge, and because of the backlog that exists in the US immigration system as of right now, that could take years, so they know that it will probably be better for them to turn themselves in and wait out that time instead of running away and taking their chances with
Sure, because hypothetically, even if they're waiting, it's a safer space, right? It's they've got shelter, they've got food. It's not being stuck on the border or in transit, which is fraught with all manner of risk.
Yeah, that has changed recently because of how many people are at the border asking for asylum. So they aren't always granted hygiene products or good food or good living conditions, but they know that at least the U.S. government knows they're there, so they have to wait out that process.
You also mentioned about the media portrayal of migrants. I'm guessing you're specifically referring to a kind of a US media coverage in that context. Do you sense that there's a disconnect between how US media outlets predominantly cover these stories and international outlets, or could you maybe just tell us a little bit about how those differences play out across different media channels and outlets?
Yeah, well, I think the first big disconnect is the fact that the immigrant community in the United States, both authorized and unauthorized, have responded to images such as this one of Valeria and Oscar, the migrants, by saying that they don't want their pain be put on center stage and be able to be found on every corner of the internet. but the media continues to do it because they say that it's a way to raise awareness and to bring people to understand what is going on at the border. But the fact is that in the United States that hasn't had much of an effect. Especially we can see in the camps that the migrants are being held in, there were audio recordings of children being separated from their families. There were a lot of pictures of how the migrants were being held in these camps, and it's still going on. So that's the first disconnect, I would say, because the immigrant community is trying to say something, trying to say that's not the way to do it. And the media is kind of saying, like, we know better. Let us put this picture out and give it to everybody to use as they see fit, and you'll see that it will have a positive response, which we still don't know because it was 2 days ago. But yes, I think this image does center and gives more importance to the death and the suffering of the immigrant community than it does to the very real reasons that they had when they decided to cross the border. And instead of telling Valeria and Oscar's story, or what happened before they actually drowned in the river, we're giving their pain and their suffering the center stage.
I mean, obviously there's a whole ethics debate to be had about photographs and use of photography and the like. This particular photograph has mostly been linked to the photograph of the Syrian child who was found washed up on a Greek beach a couple of years ago. I think a big difference with this photograph as opposed to other photographs of people in camps and stuff is that people who are perhaps not empathic towards migrants could still look at those images of people in camps and see different people, or people who maybe are not recognizable to them. But I feel that the kind of this particular photograph and the face down component of the father and daughter, there's a kind of an equalizer, a universal. We implicitly see ourselves in that photo. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why it's achieved so much traction in the media internationally. I'm not saying that it's right or not right to use it, but I think that's where this photo has perhaps stands out from other pictorial representations of the media situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that there might be a difference because of the context of the United States and the race relations that exist. But in the United States, black and brown bodies have been dehumanized for a very long time through media, TV shows, movies, and a lot of people have internalized that fact that they're not human in a way, that we're not human.
The collateral damage at the edge of the picture.
Exactly. And so that's what I think really complicates this argument, because to say that we see ourselves in that picture would be to say that the people that are broadcasting this picture, which a lot of them media outlets being headed by white people, that they see themselves in this. And because of the race relations in the United States, there is that differentiation of that's them, that's not me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why the argument becomes a little more complicated.
In terms of last night's, the first of two Democratic presidential debates, because the numbers are so unwieldy, so there were 10 candidates slugging it out last night. There's going to be another 10 candidates today. Two in particular, Beto O'Rourke and Julian Castro, are from Texas and are, in Castro's context, he is from the immigrant Hispanic community. In Beto's context, he's white Anglo-Saxon, but he's very much from within, I guess, that broader, or exists within that broader community. Is there any sense that a candidate with those kinds of progressive immigrant or potentially progressive immigrant policies could maybe take some steps forward in a US context, or do you think we're only seeing them at this stage because it's the early stages of the Democratic nomination process?
With the shifting political views that the Democratic Party has had, they have had a really big shift to the left. So I am curious as to whether they will pick up some of these arguments that candidates like Julian Castro are making. He is making an argument for completely decriminalizing border crossings, which no other candidate is making, as far as I know. Beto O'Rourke is not making that argument, and he's actually from El Paso, from the border. So I think it'll be interesting to see what reaction this evokes from the public and from the voter base, and to see whether, even if these candidates don't make it forward, their views will be adapted by a candidate who does move forward in order to pick up their voters.
Sure, and maybe brings them under the wing. Yeah,
Yes.
One of Julian's more memorable lines last night was to talk about not criminalizing desperation, which certainly, rang true. The debate last night also took place in Florida with a big Latino population. There seemed to be a lot of support for Castro in particular from the audience, but I guess a lot of that was to do with the locality in which the debate took place. Also, as regards the other candidates we saw last night and that we are going to see tonight, what's your sense of which way the Democratic Party and the nominations are likely to go over the course of the next few months before the primaries begin in February and March?
I actually don't know what to expect. What my previous experience would tell me that probably Joe Biden will end up being the nominee, which would be very unfortunate in my opinion, my personal opinion.
Classic centrist.
Yes, exactly, because he has also had a lot of recent, not scandals, but a lot of upheaval over his comments on segregationist congressmen and how he wants to work with senators, and how he wants to work with them. So that has brought back a lot of backlash. But he still is up in the polls, so it's very interesting to see how people can say that they're moving to the left. And
yeah, as the polls stand, Biden is polling in, amongst this massively splintered field at around about 25%, so 1 in 4 Democratic voters, and then the next two are Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren that are in the teens, and then everybody else really after that goes down into single figures. I guess the broad question is, as the Democratic Party moves through the candidates, does the rest of the splintered field then aggregate around a particular candidate, or will some of those also move towards Biden? Will Biden remain in the centrist position, and will the broader left become the other half of the debate, or will a lot of these candidates immediately move towards to Biden as the field narrows down?
I think we're going to get a way clearer picture as these candidates start stepping down, because, as you said, we're going to see if the more progressive candidates are either going to stay in the race by picking up those people that step down, or if they're going to be dropped out and be picked up by Biden. But what happened in the last election, as we saw when Bernie Sanders did not get that nomination, a lot of people that were going to vote for him either didn't vote at all or
went to Trump,
which would be terrifying if that happened again. But I think it really is we have to wait and see what happens because there's so many candidates, what happens with their votes, who they're going to go to. Are they going to go centrist, or are they going to adhere to another candidate in the left?
Yeah, absolutely. And whether these candidates, as they drop out, and the pressure to endorse, which is so overwhelming in a US political cycle, whether the classic standard politics question, whether they endorse based on principle and ideology, or whether they endorse based on pragmatism. Thanks very much, Fernanda.
Thank you.